Bienvenidos a todos. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to those in the room here, those on the web stream. My name is Eva Zabey, and I am the Executive Director of the Business for Nature Coalition. It is my absolute pleasure to continue to moderate today, so welcome back. We had some great discussions yesterday, a lot of work still to be done. And one of the things that I was reflecting on overnight was how in the sessions, but also in the coffee breaks, we talked a lot about collaboration. Yesterday, in one of the sessions, we tried to rate different business and financial examples. And it was a bit provocative as an exercise, but it was intended to be like that. I did want to apologize for anyone who was overly uncomfortable or offended by that exercise. But I think it made me think, you know what, we all make choices every day. We make choices how to spend our money, how to spend our time, who to vote for. And the reality is that collaboration isn't always the only way to go forward. However, I was also thinking about a book I read recently. Some of you may have read it. Harari's Sapiens. Who here has read Sapiens by Harari? Okay, excellent. Lots of people putting their hands up. And it made me think that it is thanks to collaboration in our species that we've got to where we've got to, and we are the ones who have created this system. Yesterday we heard about transformational change from some of the government leaders in this world, and it is only collaboration that will get us to this next system, where we all live well within the limits of our planet. You know, we said we can't live on a dead planet. Financial performance is irrelevant on a dead planet. Business as usual is dead, as Peter Backer from the WBCSD says. And finance as usual is dead. So what are we going to do? And today the main focus is on public-private collaboration and innovation. And with that, so this morning, we have three amazing leaders who are going to share their insights with us. Hopefully be provocative, push us. We're getting impatient here, and I look forward to hearing from you. Then we will be breaking out into the breakout rooms again for more detailed discussions. Okay, so Twitter is on the slide. You can please hashtag Business Nature Summit. And also, make sure you send any questions or reflections on Slido that hopefully you're used to now. So at this point, now that I've got all of your attention, it is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Daniel Calleja, the Director General of the of Environment for the European Commission. Thank you very much, and thank you to the European Commission for everything you've done.
Muy buenos días a todos. Es un gran placer estar aquí en Madrid como Director General de Medio Ambiente de la Comisión Europea. And I will now switch to English.
Thank you.
Coming from Madrid and being Spanish, I thought it was compulsory that my first words to you were in Spanish. Let me tell you what a pleasure it is for the European Commission to host this very important summit here in Madrid, here in Spain. The European and Business and Nature Summit, it is for us a moment of truth. It is a moment to test the commitment, it is a moment to test the will, it is a moment to test the solutions that we need to put forward to face the challenges that we are facing right now. And I have to say, we have no excuse. We have no longer an excuse. We know, and if there are people who still don't know, let me repeat the facts. The Earth, our planet, is under ever-increasing pressure. We have never used and extracted more resources than what we are doing now. We would need, if we continue at this rate, not one planet is not enough. We would need 1.6 planets. We know the crisis in wildlife, the crisis in species. Of the 8 million species that are in the planet, 1 million are at risk. And humanity has wiped out 60% of mammals, reptiles, and birds since the 1970s. We know that climate change is a reality. Desertification, degradation of ecosystems. We know that we are facing a major ecological crisis. All the science goes in this direction, and I think what we see now is more awareness than ever. Young people are in the streets. They are demonstrating. They are telling us, stop discussing, stop talking, we now need action. 95% of European citizens say that environment is for them the most important priority. And 2 out of 3 are saying the European Union should do more. We recognize your leadership. We would not have had the Paris Agreement without the commitment, without the efforts of the European Union and of many other countries of the international community. But this is not enough. We now need to move forward. And we also know that the business community is increasingly aware and increasingly concerned about what's going on. Nature loss is putting businesses and the economy at risk. More and more businesses understand that they are fundamentally dependent on the health, nature, and ecosystems, and that the degradation of nature, the loss of biodiversity, is placing severe costs on businesses and on the economies. And more companies recognize that protecting, restoring, and understanding their relationship there with nature, the way they interact with the water, with the habitats, with biodiversity, with the air, is in their own economic interest. It's not only a social and moral responsibility, it is also in their economic interest because they can be more competitive if they are adequately addressing their interaction with nature. So, if all this is well known, the question is, what do we do about it? And I would like to share with you what the European Commission proposes that we should do about it. First of all, we need to stress that climate change and biodiversity are the 2 sides of the same coin. We will not succeed in climate change if we destroy our biodiversity. So we need to work in parallel in order to have a strong agenda for change which covers both the climate change and the biodiversity dimension. We have done a lot in climate change. We have the Paris Agreement, but we have not succeeded as much as in climate change with biodiversity. So we have an opportunity, and the opportunity will come at the end of next year in China, in Kunming, in the Convention for Biodiversity. We need a Paris moment for biodiversity. And we need 4 things. We need to establish a global target, the equivalent to the 2 degrees or the 1.5 degree of Paris, to measure and to be able to work on the agenda to fight biodiversity loss. Second, we need national commitments, national action plans, national strategies. Third, we need a strong monitoring mechanism. And fourth, we need financing in order to be able to mobilize the efforts. We know what are the key drivers of biodiversity loss. Changes in the use of land and sea, over-exploitation of resources, climate change, pollution, invasive alien species. We know that many of these are directly linked to unsustainable human activities. And this is why the President of the European Commission, the President-elect, Ursula von der Leyen, has put on the table the proposal for a European Green Deal. And within the first 100 days of the new Commission, and we are waiting for the new Commission to take office, we hope it will take office soon, quickly, because as soon as it takes office, the 100 days count, I have told my colleagues, don't worry if there's a delay, because then we will have more than 100 days to prepare the proposals. But the European Green Deal is there to open a wide range of new investment opportunities for businesses to deal both with the climate and biodiversity losses. We want a new ambitious European climate law to the climate neutrality target for 2050. We want a European climate pact. There will be a new circular economy action plan, a zero pollution ambition, an initiative to have a sustainable food system from farm to fork. And we know very well that we need to address also the common agricultural policy if we are going to be efficient in our action in the biodiversity agenda, both the agriculture and also the fisheries policy. And we will also need to look at tax policies and mobilizing the European Investment Bank to become a climate bank in order to move forward. Now, what about the business community? And you are all here representing, in many ways, organizations, businesses who are committed to biodiversity. Well, the Commission is working on a Sustainable Europe investment plan. 1 trillion euros of investment over the next decade. A strategy for green financing. But we know that the public budgets will not be enough. And we also know that we will not be successful if this is just action from the private sector. If we are to stop the loss of biodiversity, we need the active implication of the business community. Nothing will happen if we don't have the engagement and if we don't have the action of the business community. And there is no contradiction between sustainability and business competitiveness. In fact, I always say business models which are not sustainable, businesses which don't have a sustainable business model will not survive. You will only be able to survive if you are sustainable. You will only be competitive if you are sustainable. And for that, business has to be seen as part of the solution, not part of the problem. And one of the things we need to do is to measure the interaction of businesses with nature. And this is where natural capital accounting comes into account. We have an accounting systems which date from the 16th century. I learned in the university that there was an Italian monk called Fray Luca Pacioli who invented the double accounting. This is the 16th century. We are in the 21st century. How many businesses measure their interaction with nature, with water, with biodiversity? How many businesses integrate in their accounting systems this element? This is essential. And I know you were discussing this yesterday, and we need to continue the discussions, but more than the discussion, put in place accounting systems that reflect this interaction. We also need to build partnerships. Business partnerships are essential to mainstream biodiversity and sustainable decision-making into the EU policies. And this is why the Business and Biodiversity Platform is such an exciting initiative. The platform is about sharing best practices, methodologies for measuring the biodiversity footprint, inviting companies to develop more generally accepted natural capital accounting principles. In fact, creating a momentum to act, creating a momentum in order to change things. So, I would like to conclude, because I see the moderator, Eva, is looking at me with some severity, and I don't want to be in trouble with her. But let me conclude with a final thought. Yes, the challenges that we are facing are without precedent in the history of mankind. Yes, there is a sense of urgency. Yes, we have to act, and we have to act now. Tomorrow may be too late. Yes, business as usual is not an option. Yes, we need the business community. But we also have a great opportunity. Europe can lead this transformation of our society. Europe can lead this transformation of our economies. We are talking about an agenda for the planet, for the economy, and for people. And if we take this leadership, and if we move forward in decarbonizing our economy, in preserving our planet, we will also be delivering the jobs of the future. Because, ladies and gentlemen, investing in nature is the most profitable investment that ever exists, because it is investing in our future, it is investing in our planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. May I ask you a follow-up? I think a lot of those messages that you shared will resonate very well with everyone in the room, and it's brilliant to see that leadership and that clarity. I had one follow-up question. You were saying how important it is that business is part of the solution and that businesses need to engage and act. Do you have any thoughts on what would help you and the planet, I suppose, in businesses contributing to the post-2020 biodiversity framework and CBD in particular in Kunming? Do you have an idea of any other thoughts you just wanted to expand briefly on businesses and what we can do to drive that?
I talk from
here. As you wish.
I talk from here. So I think this is a follow-up question I like because it's concrete.
Okay.
So I think I would say three things. First of all, your commitment. We need to expand this platform. We need to gain awareness, and we need to bring more people in. And the more I talk with businesses, the more I see the interest they have. Not just because we all want to save the planet, but because business community realizes that this is also in their own interest. So more engagement, more awareness. Second, we need concrete ideas. You are experts in accounting, you are experts in a measurement, you are developing business models. We need your ideas, we need your contribution. We have very little time ahead of Kunming. Kunming conference will be a moment of truth. We have the Aichi targets, which we will not meet. We failed already 10 years ago. The biggest failure is that we say, well, since we didn't meet the Aichi targets, we postponed them to 2030. We have very little time. We need to engage the international community in a very complex negotiation. And we need to put on the table simple, effective, and concrete actions. And we are looking forward for your proposals. I am always calling to international community organizations. Do you have ideas? Do you have effective mechanisms that you are using in your daily activities that you could put? And the third thing that we need is that you are all playing an important role in your countries. So we need to create this sense of urgency and also push national governments. And I have to tell you, I am delighted that we have here the Secretary of State of Finland, Mrs. Lehtonen. I thank you for her leadership, for the leadership of the Finnish presidency, because we need also, at the end, that this goes up to the governments, to the highest levels, that biodiversity is considered a top priority and that we push this forward. And I think if we do so, we can succeed. And I think we will succeed.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
I sit here or I go down?
You can go down, yes. And by the way, I have to say, both my kids and colleagues often say that I look like a school teacher, which I actually take as a compliment. So I'm happy that you were put on the spot. Next up, thank you, Mr. Marco Lambertini, the Director General of WWF International. We welcome all of your thoughts on what next and what to do. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you very much, Eva, and buenos dias a todos. It's always a trick position to be speaking after Daniel. For a number of reasons. Of course, he's so charming and so eloquent, but also because he's already mentioned a lot of the things that I wanted to mention too, which in itself is quite exciting, because it shows that actually there is a lot of progress in converging on the same narrative and in understanding the same issues. So I don't need to tell you, I don't need to tell this audience, also because Daniel already told you, that the planet is in the red. I don't need to list the different issues and data and figures that show that the trends in terms of the health of the natural system of the planet are all going in the wrong direction. But I want to say that the exciting dimension of today, compared to just a decade ago, is that today we know. We know very well let me pause. I know you guys are all technical people, and I was a scientist in my early days too. And scientists, and it's good, never think they know enough, which is actually true. But in terms of setting policies, direction, and beginning to promote action, frankly, we know enough. We know enough of what's happening in the world. We know enough how the natural systems are working. We know enough about the pressures on the ecosystems and natural systems and climate. So we have the knowledge. And knowledge and science has never been clearer than today. Figures, there's so many you can add to this list, are so unequivocal today. We are approaching an emergency, and this is what scientists are very increasingly spoken about. We also know, Daniel mentioned earlier, and this is not a little thing, that the issue of climate change and the issue of natural loss treated so long as independent agendas and track of thinking and track of action are actually interdependent. This is not a small conclusion. And I have to say, I came away, for example, from the UNGA Climate Summit of the Secretary General in New York in September, really encouraged by how much reference to the integration between climate and nature loss and the whole emphasis on nature-based solutions, how strong that was. Fantastic. And we know also that something that we never really thought about, and the way that David is putting it so simply and so powerfully, that the actions of the next few years, we're talking about a decade, are going to have consequences for the several thousands of years, not just for the planet, but for our own civilization. And that's the most important development, cultural development, almost a cultural revolution, I think, in our civilization. We're really beginning to understand not just what happens, but also the consequences of what happens, and particularly the consequences for us. And that positions the agenda of nature conservation in a very different place. Not a place where we, nature lovers, or we, scientists, environmentalists, and Minister of Environment are concerned, is a concern for the whole society. And in a SDG context, it's pretty clear that we are not going to have a stable economy and a thriving society in a degraded planet. The reports coming out from the UN system, the IPCC reports, the IBES reports, have really helped to crystallize the science and make the case for nature conservation and climate action very strong. But they haven't just identified the issues vis-à-vis the planet. They have identified the risks to our economic model and to our society. Extraordinary. The global risk report of the World Economic Forum in the last 3-4 years has started to increase the number of environmental risks at the top of their ranking, to the point that in 2020, I understand, the press don't quote me because it's still a secret, but all the risk, the top 5 risks will be related to environmental degradation, either climate or natural systems. And also, it's not just about risk. As Daniel said, it's about opportunities. And all the initiative and studies is evaluation, so the potential for business, for economic growth, and job creation related for the circular economy, for example, are mind-blowing and are making a clear economic case for conserving our natural systems. Same in terms of job creation, fossil fuel versus renewable, biological agriculture versus chemical agriculture. And we are beginning to see, both in terms of investment and market capitalization, really the shifting of the financial flows. Super exciting. Companies are coming together more and more. There is still a long tail of laggards, but there is also a strong head of leaders. The question we know is twofold: faster and more. We need to scale up and we need to accelerate. But we are on the right track. And companies are increasingly playing a key role, not just by committing, but also by putting those commitments into action and advocating within the sector for the same to happen at scale. There have been a lot of great examples of collaboration with companies here and commitments, and I heard yesterday some new fantastic one I haven't heard before. This is wonderful. And here are just a couple from our perspective that are quite interesting because show the depth of the engagement of companies like Alpro, for example. This is really looking now and measuring their footprint on climate and biodiversity using planetary boundaries approach. Or indeed, this interesting financial mechanism with NHM in Turkey, where basically a grantee bank is supporting sustainable use of water in a very heavily dependent economy, local economy on textile production. And NHM has committed to buy only from those producers. All these are great examples, but let me conclude at a little bit higher level. We are making a lot of great progress on climate for a number of reasons. Because we are seeing the risk, because we are understanding the risk, but also because, and I'm profoundly convinced about this, also because we have a clear vision for it. A vision that inspired the Paris Agreement and was actually the aggregator, the glue that brought together governments and companies and society. A vision that was science-based and that told us that we need to be carbon neutral by mid-century. That's the vision. And the apex target of 1.5 degrees reflect that commitment. That's the power of the climate agenda today. A clear vision and a clear target. Simple, measurable, and clear. In fact, it's not that simple when you look below, but in terms of the presentation of it, it's fantastically clear and simple. We don't have that for the other natural systems. We desperately need it. And I know that I hear so many times, oh, but you know, a gas in the atmosphere is so much simpler than actually the natural system and biological diversity. I push back on that challenge. I don't think it's true. Carbon neutrality is not a simple concept, and the pathway to get there is very complicated. We need to adopt the same approach to nature conservation. Ocean, forest, biodiversity, fresh water. We need to come up with an holistic apex target and a vision that allows everything else to flow. All the commitments we hear today, yesterday, and in many other fora are great, but we don't know if they add up to the ambition that we need to embrace. It's like having a high jump race or competition without a bar. We need that bar. We need the North Star like we have for climate. What is it? Is it a concept of nature neutrality? Is it a concept of net positive gain when you talk about natural systems, natural places, natural ecosystems? Is it a zero net loss? It is a net gain up? Let's discuss this, but we need to come up with something that inspires politicians and give clear directions to companies as well. And everything else follows through. This is a little bit our thinking, and I conclude with these slides. We have three problems. We are losing too much ecosystem, we are losing too many species, and the drivers of that loss is our production and consumption model. These are the three challenges that we are facing. And the targets that should go under the global vision of nature neutrality or net gain by 2030 need to address the three major issues. We need to protect, we need to stop losing natural habitat, we need to stop losing species, and we need to change the production and consumption model. And then you can discuss about the target, the 30% in terms of protection, the sustainable management, the restoration, the indigenous people land for species. We talk about the other drivers for species. And when it comes to the footprint, that's where the really exciting opportunity that as an environmentalist, I never felt I had before, we have in our hands, is to really seriously tackle the footprint dimension. The big five economic sectors that today are the drivers of the majority of natural loss: agriculture, fisheries, infrastructure, extractives, and forestry. If we engage in a debate on how to shift from unsustainable fisheries, agriculture, extractives, infrastructure, and forestry to sustainable practices, like we are doing from fossil fuel to renewable energy, if we engage the private sector and the regulators in driving that shift, then we're going to really achieve the nature neutrality vision and target or net gain vision and target that I was talking about before. And all that under a lens, a clear lens of benefits for nature and for humanity. Food security, water security, climate stability, and ultimately good, prosperous life for all. Clearly, we are in the middle of a transition, and we need to invest in that transition, but we need to clarify the end point of that transition to everyone in this world. Let's not be fooled. What we are talking about here today in this room may seem obvious. It is not obvious outside. It is not obvious still in the majority of the financial systems, in the majority of investment players, in the majority of the head of states. We need to penetrate those sectors, the audiences, with a simple, clear message around the narrative of nature indispensability for our own development. Next year is the year we can do that. There is a convergence, a perfect storm. We call it the super year for sustainability. The anniversary of the UN, the CBD renewal, the new Ocean Treaty, the NDCs, all is coming together, many other things, all is coming together. We need to take that opportunity, and it's not just the Kunming CBD, it's a variety of opportunities in the year of sustainability. We call it the New Deal for Nature and People. You call it the Green Deal for Europe. It's the same thing. We need a deal. We need a commitment, a target, a vision, and a plan for implementation and resourcing that really engages the key audiences. We are super excited about this opportunity. I've been in conservation for all my life. I started at 12 years old as a volunteer in WWF. I've never been excited, which is a bit crazy because the world is going down the tube. But nevertheless, I see the response emerging and I see the opportunity to change. And as somebody, not me, said in a very powerful way, we are the first generation that knows that we are destroying the world, and we are probably the last one that can really do something significant about it. It's a massive responsibility, quite scary, but a great excitement opportunity as well. Thank you.
Oh, Marco? Thanks so much. Do you mind if I ask you one question?
I hate questions. I hate questions.
Okay, that's okay then. This was inspiring, and the ambition is so clear, and I love that presentation. I had one question yesterday, and even earlier today. We've been speaking quite a lot about all of the, the incentives and natural capital accounting, and how can companies integrate the actual value in a monetary sense, sometimes a monetary economic estimate of what is the impact and dependence of their company on nature, so that ultimately companies can be rewarded on their performance overall, not just their returns on financial. Now, I know that as soon as we get into monetary valuation, it gets tricky sometimes, yeah. And I know that we've been working closely with many conservation organizations, but I wanted to, if I may, ask just your perception or perspective on how things might be changing, and whether that's something that it's if this is also the right thing for us to be spending time on to integrate that into performance.
Absolutely. I mean, that's obviously how you're going to make the whole thing work, and unless the natural capitals, the value of nature, more in general, are internalized into the economic system and into the accounting system, surely we're not going to go anywhere. But I continue to be a bit monothematic on my push here, on my message. So all that can happen only if we're really clear on the why we need to do this, on the necessity of doing it, and on where we need to get in 10, 15 years' time. The target dimension is so important for me because it sets the pace, it set the pace for any process underneath. And this is exactly what's happening in climate. Why? I mean, I never thought, even just 15 years ago, that so many companies are actually asking for a price on carbon. I mean, they are asking for a price on carbon. It's so counterintuitive, but it isn't, because they actually have understood that they need to get to carbon neutrality. They have to come to carbon. And so the price on carbon is the only way they can do that in a level playing field way, and so without having to fight with the competitors, et cetera, et cetera. We need that vision. We need that neutrality approach, and then everything I think will follow. But the work that you guys are doing, particularly the specialist on accounting, is super important, because I hope very soon we'll get exactly to the point.
Thank you.
Once we agree on the bigger picture, then we need actually to measure.
Amazing.
Because if you don't measure, you don't manage.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And our last speaker for this kickoff session of leaders is Peter White, who's the ambassador for biodiversity and the CBD COP15 for WBCSD. So over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. And Marco said it's very hard to follow Daniel. You try following Daniel and Marco. As you can imagine, we live in a very complex world. I don't have to explain to the people in this room, ecosystems are really complex too. But we don't have to make it complicated. As you've heard, and as I think we've just seen, this is a time for leadership. Colin Powell, a great leader, said, "Great leaders are almost always great simplifiers who can cut through argument, debate, and doubt to offer a solution everyone can understand." Last month, Peter Backer, the president of the WBCSD, addressed the council of the WBCSD, the CEOs from the 200 companies that make up the council. And he boiled down the whole sustainability field, the whole sustainability area, to just 3 big issues: climate change, loss of nature, inequality. We've heard that already from speakers today. And of course, they're linked. We won't get to Paris without transformation of food and land and the use of nature-based solutions. There won't be any nature if it's not also a deal for people. And inequality will rise as climate change occurs and nature loss takes effect. We've already heard, though, that nature is on that list, which is great. If you were in New York during the General Assembly week, you might think that it was actually Nature Week, not Climate Week. So we stand, as we've heard, at the start of a super year. The agendas of climate, of nature, of food, of health, of livelihoods are all going to be up for debate in a whole range of different venues. We need to address these issues together, and we can use the levers of the other issues to help nature. Nature must be part of the climate debate. Climate must be part of the nature debate. It must be part of the economic debate, the debates at G7 and G20. Now, you could say that's a big ask, it's a big task, but in a way, we've been there before. 4 years ago, we were standing at the eve of COP21 in Paris. We learned a lot in that process, and although Paris wasn't 100% a success, as we've seen more recently, it took us an awful long way in terms of agreements. What did we learn? In Paris, by the time we got to Paris, the science was unequivocal as a bedrock. IPCC had done its work. We had that clear apex target, the 1.5 degrees. On the business front, we had a group, We Mean Business, coming together to create a unified business voice that gave a compelling narrative on the importance of climate and what business could do. Then there were solutions and commitments from the non-state actors, from the private sector, but also from cities and others. And that gave the policymakers the confidence to be ambitious. And business also could actually come forward with very simple and clear policy asks. We need a price on carbon. We need carbon neutrality by mid-century. We need a ratchet mechanism and a review system. We need a small list of very specific policy asks. Fast forward 4 years to today. We have Business for Nature. You might think of it as a We Mean Business for nature. It's new, but fast-growing. Over 35 organizations have come together to actually provide that strong business voice going forward. It's a coalition, not an organization. It's influential organizations and forward-thinking businesses, and the idea is to unify the business voice, show there is action. That gives the policymakers the courage and the comfort to make those ambitious agreements in 2020, both in Kunming, but in other places too. As we've already heard, the science and the economics are becoming clear. The IPCC for Nature, IPBES report, very clearly says what the causes of deforestation and loss of nature are all about. But there are other areas, there are signs of hope. If you've seen the FOLU report, Growing Better, there's some calculations there that show rather than losing 400 million hectares a year from the food system, if the food system can transform, we can release 1.2 billion hectares from producing food that can be used back for nature. So that changes the way we're starting to think. But it's also clear we need action, and it's becoming clear what we need to do. It's clear we need natural areas to be protected, restored, and connected. The productive areas need to be sustainably managed within the planetary boundaries, and those man-made environments need to be restored, re-diversified, and renatured. And there's a clear role for business in all three, in particular that middle one, going forward. We heard from Marco, we don't have the 1.5 degrees target. We need that. We also need the science-based targets, but we don't want to wait till everything is perfect. As Marco says, scientists will always say we need more research. We need targets that are simple, clear, and transparent. They need to be science-based. Most importantly, they need to be commonly accepted. Not right or wrong. There is no right or wrong. They are commonly accepted. Accounting standards are not right or wrong, but we all agree on the way that they should be done. They should be action-oriented, and they should be measurable. So what's Business for Nature actually going to do? Well, following the lead of We Mean Business, it's going to do four things. It's going to provide that compelling narrative, the voice of business. Business for Nature does what it says on the tin. It's the voice of business, and it's about nature. We've deliberately chosen nature, not biodiversity, because nature is a much better term. It translates much better for business. It's a simpler message going forward. We're going to provide solutions going forward, showcasing the action that's already underway and bringing together the commitments. And that will allow us to identify what are the policy asks going forward. We've heard a lot about solutions here yesterday, and we'll hear more today. Business is working in its own operations, in its own supply chains, work like the One Planet Business and Biodiversity work that we heard from yesterday from Alice, OP2B, that's looking at regenerative agriculture. Landscape-level collaborations, which we need. As we heard yesterday about the Delta Plan in Holland from Bas Rutte, areas like the Soft Commodities Forum are coming together, soft commodities companies around the issues of deforestation in the Cerrado region of Brazil. And all the work around changing the way that business is run, the systemic piece, including natural capital in decision-making. Now, if we could do that last one, everything else will be fixed. But we can't wait for that to happen. We have to work on all three levels going forward. And we want to bring forward those solutions into the debate going forward. And also the commitments. There are a whole range of commitments. Business for Nature wants to aggregate those commitments, not create new ones, but signpost to companies which ones are the most relevant ones for them. Over 360 businesses already have made commitments to help reverse nature loss going forward. And then there's this key piece about policy asks. And this is where we need your help as businesses. We've got some initial policy asks. You could say they're the obvious ones. We want the adoption of an ambitious target and an emergency declaration. We want to have agreement on science-based targets going forward, and we have to provide the incentives. As Martin said yesterday, that's the elephant in the room. If it pays to cut down trees, to degrade landscapes, that's not going to work. We need to have the incentives to push things in the right direction. And we've just launched a call to businesses, a survey, to get your ideas on. So what are those few key parts going forward on the policy front? What's going to be the price on carbon? Is it value nature? What's going to be the long-term target? What do we want to actually have as the clear targets going forward? Going forward, I started by saying it's a 12-month sprint. I think it should actually be seen as a 10-month marathon.
10 year.
Sorry, 10 year. Thank you, Eva. I can't even read. It's 10 years. This is the long term. It's not just the short term going forward. We'd ask everyone here who's from business to join the community, join Business for Nature community to help halt the loss of nature, help us define those policy asks, help us take those out ahead of the meetings next year so the voice of business is clear and loud and strong. I'll finish with a quote from Einstein. Einstein said, "Everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler." And if you want a simple business case for why we should be doing this, there are no jobs, and there is no business on a dead planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Peter. Sorry, I didn't realize my mic was on but I love that. 12-month sprint, 10-year marathon. I'm going to let you off the hook for your follow-up question, if that's okay, because we are getting a little bit tight on time.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Peter.